You wake up in 1880s London and immediately regret it. The air is thick, like breathing through a damp wool sock that's been stored in a chimney. It smells like coal, wet horse, and a faint note of, "This street has not been cleaned since the Roman Empire." You cough, but it's not a polite little cough. It's one of those deep, lung-rattling hacks that makes you wonder if you've just lost a piece of yourself. Welcome to the Victorian era, where your lungs are public property and soot is the latest fashion accessory. You're in a small rented room above a bakery, which sounds nice until you realize the bakery's oven is also your central heating. You're sweating on one side, freezing on the other, and the whole place smells like burned bread crust and despair. The wallpaper is floral, but not in a charming vintage way. It's peeling and stained in shapes that look suspiciously like murder scenes. Your bed is basically a sack stuffed with horsehair, which makes every night feel like a wrestling match with a shedding pony. When you finally stagger to the window and push it open, a wall of fog hits you in the face. This isn't dreamy cinematic fog. This is industrial strength, poison in your eyeballs fog. It's so dense you can't see the street below, but you can hear it. The clop of hooves, the squeal of carriage wheels, a man yelling something about hot eels for sale, and somewhere in the distance, a woman shouting at a child in the kind of tone that says, "I love you, but I will also throw this shoe at you." This is London at the height of the Victorian era. Queen Victoria is sitting somewhere in Buckingham Palace right now, radiating judgment from beneath her crown. Everything here runs on manners, hierarchy, and an obsessive fear of public embarrassment. It is not enough to avoid doing something scandalous. You have to avoid even looking like the kind of person who might someday do something scandalous. And they have rules for everything. The rules are not written down in a friendly pamphlet. No, they're absorbed from the air like a slow-acting poison, which means if you're new here, you're going to mess up. You're going to use the wrong fork. You're going to greet someone in the wrong order. You're going to walk on the wrong side of the street and get a side eye so sharp it could slice your hat clean in two. Speaking of hats, you need one. Everyone needs one. You, bareheaded, are basically committing a public indecency. The correct hat says, "I am respectable." The wrong hat says, "I am either a criminal or French." And heaven help you if you tip your hat to the wrong person. Etiquette dictates exactly who you tip it to, when, and how much wrist you show while doing it. Get it wrong and people will write about it in their diaries for weeks. You shuffle into the street, blending with the tide of people. Ladies swish past in dresses that look like they're made of 6 layers of upholstery. Men stride by in dark coats with lapels so stiff they could deflect a bullet. Everyone is trying desperately to look like they belong here, calm, composed, above the muck and noise, while simultaneously stepping over horse droppings like it's a competitive sport. The streets themselves are alive. Newspaper boys shout the headlines. Something about a royal scandal, a murder in Whitechapel, and the weather. Spoiler, still bad. The cobblestones are slick with last night's rain, which mixes charmingly with the constant stream of waste tossed from windows. Yes, that waste. You've been warned. If you hear someone shout, "Gardy-loo," you have about 3 seconds to jump for your life. You catch sight of a shop window, the glass clouded with soot and breath. Inside, there's a display of porcelain teacups, so delicate they look like they'd shatter if you even thought about paying with coins instead of credit at the right bank. These cups aren't for drinking tea. They're for displaying your status. Because in the Victorian era, everything is a performance. How you hold your teacup, how you nod to someone in passing, even how you stand when you're pretending not to eavesdrop on your neighbor's conversation. And here's where it hits you. The city isn't just physically dirty, it's socially filthy. Everyone here is constantly watching, listening, judging. You think social media is bad? At least you can close an app. In Victorian London, the app is life, and you can't log out. Every move you make could be your undoing. Sit the wrong way in a chair? Unrefined? Eat your bread in the wrong order? Probably a radical. Forget to thank someone for passing you the salt? likely to die in debtor's prison. It's exhausting, like living inside one of those period dramas where nothing actually happens, but the tension could kill a small horse. Somewhere down the street, a carriage clatters to a stop. The driver tips his hat to a lady stepping out. Slow, deliberate, just the right angle. She's wearing a gown the size of a small tent, her gloves spotless, her face set in an expression that says she's either smelling fresh flowers or trying to suppress the urge to vomit. She glances in your direction, and for one horrifying moment, you think about smiling. Don't. Not unless you've been properly introduced, and not unless you know exactly what kind of smile is appropriate for someone of her social rank. The wrong smile can start rumors. The right smile can get you invited to a tea party where you will then have more opportunities to ruin your life. By now you've realized, survival here isn't about food or shelter or avoiding the black lung from the air. It's about learning the unspoken rules. Fast. One slip, and you're socially dead. And here's the terrifying part. They don't bury the socially dead. They just keep inviting you to things out of politeness, and then making sure you feel like the most irrelevant person in the room. It's like being a ghost at your own funeral, except you're still wearing your good hat. So here you are, in the middle of the street, breathing in the fog, the coal, the gossip. Somewhere, Queen Victoria is frowning in your general direction. Somewhere else, Mrs. Abernathy is already telling someone that you looked a little too interested in the hat shop. You've been here for 5 minutes and you've probably already broken 6 rules. And yet, there's a strange thrill to it. Because as ridiculous as it all is, you're inside the game now. And the only question is whether you can learn the rules before the city swallows you whole. You've been handed your role in Victorian society and it's not glamorous. No, you're not some dashing aristocrat swooping into balls with champagne in one hand and a monocle in the other. You're just respectable enough. Which sounds fine until you realize that respectable here is a full-time job that pays absolutely nothing, comes with no benefits, and requires constant emotional labor to avoid humiliation. Your day starts early, not because you're eager, but because someone bangs on the door at 6 a.m. with a delivery of coal. It's dumped right onto the street, where you now have to haul it inside yourself. Your gloves turn black instantly, but you can't complain. Complaining is low class. Everything in this city is dirty, uncomfortable, and vaguely life-threatening. But the real danger is letting anyone see that you notice. You get dressed, which isn't just throwing on clothes. It is more like participating in a small-scale military operation. Layers upon layers, undergarments, stockings, petticoats if you're a woman, waistcoat if you're a man, then the outer garments, then accessories, then the finishing touch, a hat, because God help you if you leave the house bareheaded. You don't just wear clothes, you armor yourself in social camouflage. Every stitch has to say, I belong here, I know the rules, don't throw me in the gossip furnace. Breakfast is cold toast and something pretending to be tea. You have to hold the cup delicately, because apparently your hand position is a measure of your breeding. No gulping, no slurping. And if you're a man, don't even think about resting your elbows on the table. That is basically announcing to the world that your parents raised wolves. Once fed, it is time for the day's main chore. Existing in public without committing social suicide. The simplest task, say visiting someone, is an ordeal. You can't just knock on the door. You have to send a calling card first, delivered in person, but you don't go in. You hand the card to the servant, who places it on a silver tray. Then you leave, go home, and wait. If they decide you're worthy, you'll get a reply card inviting you to come over. If they don't, you're left to wonder which minor faux pas got you blacklisted. Maybe your boots weren't polished enough last time. Maybe you were seen talking to the wrong person. Maybe your face just looks like you'd enjoy a good scandal. If you do get an invitation, the performance begins. You arrive exactly on time. Too early is desperate. Too late is disrespectful. You're shown into the parlor, where you perch on the edge of a chair as though the slightest relaxation might indicate moral decay. The conversation? Excruciatingly boring by modern standards. You can't talk politics, religion, or anything remotely personal. The safe topics are the weather, the latest charity event, and possibly, if you're feeling wild, the Queen's newest portrait. Even laughter is regulated. If something is genuinely funny, you have to smile politely, perhaps let out a soft, ladylike chuckle. None of that wheeze-laughing or knee-slapping nonsense. You are here to project poise, not to have a good time. Having a good time is suspicious. If you're a man, you're expected to be gallant, holding doors, offering seats, picking up dropped gloves, but in a way that looks effortless, as though you were born with an invisible instruction manual. If you're a woman, your job is to be charming without being forward, attractive without seeming vain, accomplished without threatening male egos. It's like walking a tightrope over a pit filled with sharks, except the sharks are your peers.
And instead of teeth, they have an infinite supply of passive-aggressive remarks. The rest of your day is a series of such tightropes. Walking through the park, mind your pace. Too fast, and you look rushed, possibly guilty. Too slow, and you look lazy, possibly ill. Shopping? Remember to address the shopkeeper politely, but not too warmly. Friendliness with trade is considered a little suspicious.
Passing someone you know on the street? Tip your hat. But don't stop unless they initiate conversation. And for heaven's sake, don't be seen buying anything personal, like undergarments, because people will imagine you rebuying them for illicit reasons. If you have servants, your job is harder in some ways. You have to manage them according to the unwritten code. Be firm but not cruel, grateful but not indulgent, because if you're too kind, you're weak, and if you're too harsh, you're a tyrant. And if you don't have servants, you have to pretend you do, by outsourcing small tasks to local boys or paying neighbors for favors. Also, it appears that you live the proper way. By mid-afternoon, your brain is fried. You haven't said or done anything real all day. You've been holding yourself in like a champagne cork, and the only thing keeping you from exploding is the thought of going home, shutting the door, and finally letting your shoulders drop. But even at home, you have to be careful. Servants overhear things, neighbors watch from windows, and the wrong person spotting you in your dressing gown could become a full week's worth of gossip fodder. The job of being respectable isn't just tiring, it's absurd. You are constantly curating a version of yourself that matches a social ideal so rigid it could snap in half if you looked at it wrong. And yet, everyone here buys into it, because the cost of slipping up is steep. Not actual death, of course, but in a society where who you know is everything, losing face can be as ruinous as losing your home. So you keep playing. You keep bowing, nodding, offering the right pleasantries, laughing at the right pitch. You keep your hands clean even when the streets are filthy, your words polite, even when your thoughts aren't. You survive another day in this strange, suffocating performance, knowing that tomorrow you'll have to do it all over again, and do it perfectly. The people you have to deal with here are a cast of characters so strange, so perfectly tuned to the art of quiet judgment, that you sometimes wonder if the whole city is just an elaborate stage play and no one told you. Everyone has a role, and they play it with the kind of precision that makes you both impressed and terrified. First, there are the matriarchs, the iron-fisted queens of the social web. Women like Mrs. Abernathy, whose eyes could strip paint from a wall. She doesn't just attend tea parties, she runs them like covert intelligence operations. Every nod, every raised eyebrow, every OIC is another entry in the mental ledger she keeps on everyone. She never forgets a slip-up. One time you called her by her first name in public, and while she smiled and said, "Of course, dear," you knew you'd just been sentenced to a lifetime of being accidentally excluded from the best conversations. Then you have the gentlemen, who on the surface appear chivalrous, but are really just peacocks in waistcoats. They love a chance to tip their hat dramatically, to offer a hand with just the right amount of grip, to quote Shakespeare in a way that sounds intelligent but has absolutely nothing to do with the conversation. They linger in doorways, surveying the room like they're about to duel someone over a misunderstanding from 3 years ago. Half of them are harmless, half are dangerous. And the tricky part is, you never really know which is which until it's far too late. And of course, there are the young debutantes, wide-eyed, corseted within an inch of their lives, pretending not to care about marriage while caring very much about marriage. They flit around the room like butterflies that have been trained to land only on the most eligible flowers. You're polite to them because you must be, but you can't help noticing the desperation hidden behind their polite giggles. You make a mental note never to get between two of them. If there is a rich bachelor in the room, Victorian smiles can turn into sabers in seconds. The servants, though, they're the real observers. They see everything, hear everything, and store it all away. The butler knows who drinks too much sherry. The maid knows whose corsets no longer fit, and the footman knows exactly which business trips involve neither business nor trips. They don't speak of it openly, of course, not unless they're paid to, or unless they really dislike you. And trust me, you do not want a servant to dislike you. The upper class may own the reputations, but the servants own the truth. There are also the climbers, those determined souls clawing their way up the social ladder, often with more energy than tact. They're the ones who laugh too loudly at the host's jokes, who conveniently forget to return borrowed books just so they can have an excuse to visit again, who insist on telling everyone about the time they met the Prince of Wales, which was really just them seeing him from across the street. They're both exhausting and slightly admirable, because you know the sheer mental gymnastics it takes to keep up this level of effort without collapsing. Social gatherings become battlefields. The drawing room is the arena, the refreshments table is the neutral zone, and every casual remark is a potential trap. "I adore your dress," someone says, and you can't tell if it's genuine or a dagger hidden in satin. "Oh, is that last season's cut?" someone else murmurs, and you suddenly wish you could sink into the carpet. You try to hold your own, matching small talk with small talk, laughing in the right places, offering the right compliments. But it's exhausting trying to read 100 invisible subtexts at once. Conversations are rarely about what they seem to be about. A discussion about a recent opera performance might actually be a coded assessment of someone's finances. A comment about a cousin's engagement might be a subtle warning about a brewing scandal. Even silence is loaded. Stand too far from someone and you're cold. Stand too close and you're forward. Every gesture, every pause, every flicker of expression is a data point someone will remember later. You find yourself adopting strategies to survive. Align yourself with the right ally. Someone popular enough to shield you from suspicion but not so powerful that they can destroy you with a single word. Learn to deliver vague answers that sound specific so people think you've agreed with them when you've actually said nothing. Practice the art of the non-committal smile, the one that suggests you're amused, but not enough to take a side. But there's always that one person who gets under your skin. Maybe it's the smug bachelor who delights in making you the punchline of his stories. Maybe it's the rival who mimics your mannerisms at dinner just to see if anyone notices. Or maybe it's Mrs. Abernathy herself, who you're sure can smell fear like a shark smells blood. They wait for you to slip up, to say something too honest, to laugh a little too loud. And when you do, they don't pounce. No, they smile, tuck it away, and wait for the perfect moment to bring it up in front of someone important. And here's the thing. You start doing it too. Without meaning to, you start collecting little details about people. You notice when someone repeats an outfit. You remember who didn't send a thank you note after dinner. You catch the tiny crack in someone's perfect demeanor and file it away like a weapon you might need someday. You hate yourself for it, but in this city, in this era, it's survival. By the end of the night, you've been smiled at, scrutinized, half insulted, and subtly interrogated, all while drinking tea that could strip paint. You head home wondering if you've made a good impression, or if tomorrow you'll wake up to find that everyone suddenly thinks you once danced barefoot in public. Here, reputations are made and broken in the space of a single raised eyebrow. And you? You are just trying to keep your head above water in a sea full of predators dressed in silk and lace. When the sun finally dips behind the jagged roof lines, the city exhales. But it's not relief you feel. It's something heavier, stickier, like the air just thickened with secrets. The gas lamps flicker to life, their yellow glow casting warped halos over the slick cobblestones. Shadows stretch long and thin across the street, and the fog, which never really left, creeps back in like it owns the place. Daytime in Victorian London is strict, rigid, full of rules. Nighttime is when the rules don't exactly disappear, they just change. They become flexible, pliable, and sometimes dangerously optional. The polite society you've spent all day trying to impress retreats behind closed doors, drawing the curtains tight, and what's left outside is a different version of the city. You walk down the street and hear it, the uneven rhythm of horse hooves, the faint jangle of a carriage harness, the click of boots on stone. Somewhere a door slams. Somewhere else, laughter, too loud, too sharp to be respectable. You pass an alley and catch the faint scent of gin and cigar smoke tangled with something sourer, something that makes your stomach tense. The kind of smell that says whatever happening back there isn't going to end with a polite handshake. Danger here isn't just about knives in the dark, it's about being seen in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's the beauty and the cruelty of the Victorian social machine. Even if you survive the night physically, you might not survive it socially. All it takes is one respectable person spotting you leaving the wrong doorway, and by morning your name is sliding through the gossip mill like butter on a hot pan. The so-called gentlemen-esque clubs are buzzing now, not the public ones where you sip brandy under portraits of dead dukes, but the private ones. The ones you need to be invited to by someone who won to admit they were a member. Behind heavy doors and thick velvet curtains, cards are being dealt, bets are being made, and fortunes are disappearing into other people's pockets. If you're in there, you keep your voice low and your eyes sharper than your cards, because you are surrounded by men who could shake your hand with one palm while picking your pocket with the other. Then there are the other clubs, the ones the police pretend not to know about. Music spills from them, fast and brash compared to the soft drawing-room piano you heard earlier. People are dancing here, really dancing, and women laugh with their heads thrown back, not caring who hears. You catch glimpses through half-open doors, red velvet, lace gloves, the glint of gold watches, and you realize this is where the carefully bottled-up energy of the day gets uncorked. But step inside, and you risk more than a hangover. The streets themselves are a gauntlet. Lantern light doesn't reach everywhere, and your footsteps echo in the gaps between the pools of light. You hear something behind you, maybe another walker, maybe not, and you can't help glancing over your shoulder. Every shadow looks like it might detach itself from the wall. Somewhere up ahead, a figure detaches from one. A man in a long coat, hat pulled low. He steps aside to let you pass, tips his hat, and vanishes into the fog. You keep moving, but your heartbeat's doing double time. Down by the docks, things are rougher. Sailors, dock workers, and the occasional drunk gentleman out slumming in the authentic part of town. Here, respectability is more of a suggestion than a rule. You step over puddles that might be rainwater or might be something else entirely. The air smells of fish, coal smoke, and cheap liquor. Laughter bursts from a doorway, followed by the sound of a glass shattering. You don't stop to see what happened. But the real menace after dark isn't always in the alleys or at the docks. Sometimes it's waiting in a candlelit parlor, wearing silk gloves and a knowing smile. You could be invited to a private gathering, a harmless phrase that could mean anything from an intimate poetry reading to a room full of people breaking every unspoken social law you spent the day following. The danger is, once you're there, you can't unsee it. You'll walk back into daylight tomorrow, carrying the weight of what you witnessed, and maybe, just maybe, someone will know you were there. And of course, there are whispers of worse things. The kinds of stories that sound like urban legends until you realize urban legends have to start somewhere. Women vanishing after leaving the theater. Men found in the Thames with their pockets turned inside out. the name Whitechapel drifting through conversations in hushed tones, and the newspapers selling faster on mornings when they print the grisliest details. Even if you make it through without a scrape, the night changes you. The city feels bigger, stranger, more alive, and more dangerous than it did in the daylight. You start to understand why people cling so tightly to the rules when the sun's out. The rules keep the darkness at bay. They convince everyone that things are stable, safe, orderly. But when the lamps are lit and the fog rolls in, you can see the cracks. You can hear the other London breathing underneath the respectable one. By the time you get home, your nerves are taut as piano wire. You close the door behind you and listen, really listen, for the sound of footsteps following. Maybe you hear nothing. Maybe you hear something you tell yourself was just the wind. Either way, you draw the curtains, check the lock twice, and pour yourself whatever's left of the tea. And as you sit there in the dim light, you realize the most unsettling truth of all. Tomorrow morning, you'll put on your hat, straighten your clothes, and walk back into polite society as though nothing happened. You'll smile, nod, and follow the rules. But now you know what lasts out there after dark, and it's not something you can forget. By the time morning comes again, the city looks almost innocent, like a guilty party pretending they spent the night reading by the fire instead of crawling through alleys. The fog is softer now, the kind that clings to your coat but doesn't choke you. You step outside, and the clatter of hooves, the chatter of newsboys, and the faint smell of baking bread almost trick you into thinking this is a world of civility and good manners. Almost. The thing is, after a while in the Victorian era, you stop seeing the rules as mere rules. They become a survival instinct. You find yourself straightening your posture without thinking, choosing your words like you're picking glass out of a wound, scanning a room not for exits, but for the people whose opinions actually matter. And the scariest part? You start to like it. You start to crave the tiny nods of approval, the carefully hidden smiles, the way someone's tone changes when they've decided you're one of them. It's a dangerous addiction because it's built on a lie. The truth is, everyone's terrified. The rich fear scandal, the middle-class fear slipping down the ladder, and the poor, well, they don't get the luxury of playing this game at all, which makes them a convenient scapegoat whenever the rest of society needs to tighten its grip. It's not about being moral, it's about being seen as moral. The performance is the point. You think about how familiar that feels. You've seen it in your own time, just with different costumes. Now it's likes, retweets, the right hashtags. Now it's not the cut of your dress, but the filters on your photos. We've swapped calling cards for direct messages, ballroom invitations for event RSVPs, and gossip whispered over tea for comment threads that can be screenshotted and shared in seconds. The pace has changed, but the game hasn't. We're still curating versions of ourselves for an audience that doesn't actually know us. Sometimes you wonder if anyone here actually enjoys the etiquette, or if they're all just afraid to be the first one to break it. You've seen moments, fleeting ones, when the mask slips. A burst of real laughter too loud for the room, a man leaning in a little too close to someone who isn't his wife, a matron whose polite smile falters for half a second when she hears bad news. It is in those moments you catch a glimpse of the truth. Underneath all the lace and manners, they're just people. Petty, passionate, insecure people. That's what makes it hard to hate them completely. Even the ones who wield the rules like weapons are just trying to survive. And in some twisted way, there's a comfort in knowing that everyone's stuck in the same web. You might be prey today, but with enough skill and a little luck, you could be the spider tomorrow. Still, you can't ignore the cost. The rules don't just dictate your manners, they dictate your relationships, your ambitions, even your private thoughts. You find yourself hesitating before speaking your mind, not because you don't believe in what you're saying, but because you're already calculating how it will sound repeated in someone else's parlor. You start editing yourself down to the safest, blandest version possible. And when you realize you've gone a whole day without saying anything you truly meant, you feel a twinge of something, regret, maybe, or fear that you're slowly disappearing behind your own mask. But then you remember the alternative. You've seen what happens to people who stop playing the game. They become invisible. Their invitations dry up, their friends cross the street to avoid them, their names turn into anecdotes told with pity or amusement. And in this city, being socially dead is worse than being physically dead. At least when you're dead, you don't have to watch people pretend they've never met you. So you keep going. You keep nodding in all the right places, smiling when you're supposed to, letting the tea go cold in your cup while you listen to yet another retelling of the same royal gossip. You learn to take small victories where you can, the glint of approval in someone's eye, the subtle shift of a conversation in your favor, the satisfaction of leaving a room knowing you've given them nothing to use against you. It's exhausting, it's ridiculous, and it's strangely exhilarating. Every day is a performance, and you're both actor and audience, trying to guess the ending while also writing it. Some days you imagine yourself walking away from it all, taking off the hat, speaking without a filter, laughing until the room stares at you. But deep down you know you won't. Not yet. Because for all its absurdity, there's something magnetic about this world, something addictive about the tension between what's said and what's meant. As you head home, the city settling into the gray quiet of evening again, you can't help wondering what history will make of all this. Will they see the elegance, the refinement, the romance? Or will they see the cracks, the fear, the hypocrisy, the way people bent themselves into shapes just to fit in? And will they realize how much of it still exists, dressed up in new clothes, hidden in new language? The truth is, you don't need to imagine. You're living in it already. Then, now, always. We've never really stopped performing for each other. We've just swapped corsets for keyboards and calling cards for contact lists. Human nature hasn't changed. We still measure ourselves by how well we play the game. And so you step inside, close the door, and set your hat on the table. Outside, the fog rolls in again, swallowing the street. Tomorrow you'll wake up, straighten your posture, and dive right back into the dance. Because here, in this world, and maybe in every world, survival isn't about truth. It's about the story everyone else believes.